Hey everybody, Jay Weidner here, Reality Check, and this is part two of what I'm calling Alchemy and the Traditions of the East with Sheldon Moore. Sheldon's an expert on these traditions that are mostly in India and Tibet, and kind of showing you how they mix with alchemy, which of course came from Egypt. Say, Sheldon, how you doing?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me on again. We'll finish the show finally.
Yeah, yeah, this no, it's a great show. People are going to love it. All right, so let's start here with the 24,000 year cycle.
Okay. I just wanted to go back. We've in the last
Yeah,
meeting we went through this, but I just wanted to recap about the effects of this binary system that came out of the laws of Manu, which I believe is linked to the Anunnaki because Anu, it's very much linked to the Anunnaki. And we see Anunnaki symbols. We see that handbag in Mesoamerica. That handbag is in Vedic rock carvings. It's in Göbekli Tepe. We're seeing these things all over, and I believe that that's like a branding mark. These ancients told us a long time ago. They let us. I think they let us live alone on our own, rather than using us for mining gold, whatever they did hundreds of thousands of years before that. And they left us. Somebody left us some teachings and helped us, and they built these monuments all over the world, so that when we started coming out of the dark age, because we're right down here at the bottom now, coming out of that Sandus period, that buffer zone between the dark age of Kali Yuga into the early days of Dwapara Yuga. And we're right on the cusp right now. I believe it's this year or next year. We're really close. It's
you can
hard to
feel
get
it.
it right down to a year with these calendars, though.
Everybody can feel it. Okay, everybody.
Yeah,
I talked to a
yeah,
lot of people. Everybody says there's something going on, man. I don't know. But
yeah,
I also want to point out that the original inhabitants of Japan were the Anu.
yeah, yeah. And they still exist in the Northern Islands.
Yeah.
They're like
Yeah.
almost like they look different in everything. I used to live in Japan, and they look quite different than the main Japanese people.
And the Japanese look different than the other Asians. Uh,
Yeah,
And they tell me, my Japanese friends tell me that's because they mixed with the Anu.
yeah. So what I want to go through today is I want to show everybody how these ancient cultures, in my belief anyway, they weren't just at a higher place. They had higher teachings. They were teaching a higher path to enlightenment, maybe the stuff that even surpassed Buddha or Krishna back in the Golden Age. They had these higher teaching, and Madame Blavatsky said that there was this primordial teaching that came from the ancient world that kind of went out everywhere, and we kind of lost elements of it. Well, when because I've studied Buddhism a lot, I found this hidden teaching that I'm going to share today. And once you understand the hidden teaching and how it affects your soul consciousness, your orb, your light orb within, and your own soul consciousness, because consciousness doesn't come from the brain. That's like thinking there's actors in the back of your TV shrink down. Real consciousness comes from the soul, the Buddha nature within, and the mind is just something like a microprocessor where it throws up ideas and uses it. But the because when you have a near death experience and you leave your body, your consciousness is still there. I know that for a fact because I've had that happen. And so, and my mind and my body, physical body was still there, but my consciousness was still there. So like it's not in your brain like you think. So a lot of these ancient philosophers, like Plato and Aristotle and Kant and all of them, they're always talking about philosophy related to the brain. And that's why the old Tibetan masters like Tsongkhapa, Tisha, even Nagarjuna in India, they're the true philosophers out there. They understood the consciousness and the inner part of consciousness.
Yeah, Alan Watts used to say that we should get rid of nouns. And so instead of calling a dog, you say that he's dogging. And
Yeah, that's
when
so true. Yeah,
consciousness enters the dog, it becomes
yeah,
dogging instead of that conscious, and that's what instincts are in animals. That
yeah,
the body and consciousness together create the instincts that allow a dog or a cat or anything to understand what they have to do within the environment. Now,
yeah.
And consciousness is like a radio wave, and you're like a radio receiver.
Yeah, absolutely. So everybody that's into the archaeology of a lot of these ancient sites, learn to understand this calendar a little bit better, because this is actually our calendar, I believe. This is it. This our calendar is right here in front of you right now. And it came out of the laws of Manu. The Anunnaki gave this to ancient Indian sages or whoever they gave it to. And we lost this in the Dark Age. That's what Shirak Tushwar was the guru of Yogananda, probably a true Maharishi that lived in modern times. He only passed in 1938. And they left this teaching so that we would figure out that this was our real calendar and we would know where we're at. Because if you don't really know, it's like, help, I've fallen down and I don't know what yuga I'm in. We're kind of lost right now. And when you don't really know which yuga you're in, you don't take the opportunity that we have right here as we move into Dwapara Yuga now. Enlightenment is basically 50% easier than it was in the Dark Age, which was just in our past. So Buddha became enlightened right down in here, and Jesus and Padmasambhava, all the great masters came to us in a Dark Age and attained enlightenment. The guy at Karahan Tepe that I told you about, he became enlightened up there. It was way more easy to become enlightened up here in the Golden Age than it is down in the Dark Age. So anybody who's attained enlightenment down here, praise to them because it was a tough place to become enlightened.
Well, just imagine for, a second, that you're in the 1200s or the 1100s or the 900s in Europe. You did what your did. You knew about 30 people. That's about it
Yeah,
for your whole life. You never traveled. There was no books. Um,
yeah,
it was dark.
it was really dark. Yeah, yeah. And so some people still have trouble believing that there was higher being, like higher civilization back there. You only have to keep going back to around this clock to about here, which is roughly 24,000 years ago. And we had Denisovans, we had modern ancestors of us, Homo sapiens, and Neanderthals. We had three different groups of humans only halfway around this thing just 20,000 years ago. So we don't know our past very well. There was something else going on that we don't understand, and all these big stone walls everywhere. So it's when you look at this now, and you can kind of see if you go back exactly around 12,000, 13,000 years ago, that's when Atlantis fell. That's when all that problems in the Dryas came, early and late Dryas period.
Yeah.
And it's the time Göbekli Tepe was built. They built it right at this time. I don't know if they built it just before perihelion or just after perihelion, because when perihelion happens, you would get multiple cataclysmic type events. You would get partial tilt shifts potentially, which would cause places like Atlantis to sink if they were island countries. You would get energy like plasma exchanges, earthquakes. You would get everything at that time. So it's a
So
rough time.
what it is, and the Henday Cross tells us there's a double catastrophe. And what
Yeah,
happened is that the younger Dryas started, either there was a galactic wave coming from galactic center, like Paul Laviolette says, or it's a comet strike or a meteor strike, like Graham Hancock is saying, right? And then that threw us into the younger Dryas, which was the coldest time period of all the ice age.
yeah,
And many species died. And then, as Robert Schoch says, there was a solar event. And the solar
yeah,
event immediately melted all the ice that built up over the ice ages, causing the Great Flood. And that was at the very top of the Golden Age and began the descent that happens
yeah.
at that point.
Yeah. And I think that we had all these different events happen at the same time is because when those two, it's our sun and it's a brown dwarf that's not ignited. It's not a red dwarf. It's a brown, probably a cold brown dwarf. That's why it has such a long period, 24,000 years. So when they come back together again, you get all of those events happening. So you will get more comments. So everything, all these different theories are probably right. It's just they're missing the main thing, and it's in the laws of Manus, and it's in this is our real calendar, I think. I don't think Shirik Trishwar brought this forward for just no reason. He even made star measurements in 1895 or 1898 to confirm this. He said we lost the almanacs, everything got mixed up in the Dark Age over here,
He
and we
did.
lost all our real history, and that's what happened. So.
We have even lost a few centuries of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's so all of these ancient cultures had higher teachings. And I brought this up last time, and I want everybody to go back to this. Is I showed you how the images of Thoth have this moon. They call it a moon crown. That's your crown chakra. That's what happens when you shift your consciousness and become enlightened. So these people knew about enlightenment, and this device, the Ankh, and this steel pole that he had. See how it's not a spear or a weapon. It has three little fingers. It's to stick it in the sand. And when they're watching lunar eclipses at nighttime, they put their lips on this and tap it with the Ankh. So it's just like a Tibetan singing bowl. I'm certain that's what this was for. I'm not 100% certain, but I'm pretty certain. So, and then we have Krishna with halos. We got Jesus with halos, Rama with halos. And guess what? This is Karahan Tepe, and this image of a guy who is clearly has a halo over his head. This is not a king with a crown. This is not a soldier with a spear or anything. It looks like he has some bag in his hand. And he looks like a noble Roman, but this guy's 12,000 years before Rome. So who is this guy? And my guess is if you go back to that wheel, most people don't realize this, is we've had four Buddhas appear on earth now. And the second Buddha was before Shakyamuni. His name was, what was it? Kassapa Buddha. And Kassapa Buddha, the Dzogchen teachings that we talked about before apparently go all the way back to the second. It doesn't even go, it goes past Shakyamuni's time to this second Buddha. I think this guy here potentially is the third Buddha because they're going to be spread out along that wheel somehow. And that guy is probably the, what it was, a Konagama Buddha, which was the third Buddha. So I think that this guy might be potentially, because this is an 11, 13,000 year old statue, is potentially one of the great masters of our past that we lost everything. We don't know who he is, but it's at that site, and I'll explain hopefully by the end of this, you will understand how that site was really used. It was a spiritual site. This confirms everything for me. And if you see modern scientists, they'll show a drawing of a caveman with a spear standing beside Göbekli Tepe. Does that guy look like a guy with a spear and a loincloth like the modern? That's a noble person. That's a sage. There's something more to that guy, for sure. So this hidden teaching, how I knew that. Now it's not linked. I always was trying, and you actually helped solve this problem for me, Jay, is when you said the Buddha sat in the dark age and said under the Bodhi tree, and there's not a damn thing you can do for the rest of the Kali Yuga. He had two teachings, and he gave a separate teaching to the first Kalki king of Shambhala. And it's called the Kalachakra Tantra. And we don't really know very much about it today because we only have fragments of it. We don't have the complete Kalachakra Tantra. But Shambhala became an enlightened society. It had similar teachings that came out of ancient Egypt, but they were different because when a Buddha comes, they learn it all over again. He didn't have to find an old scripture or something like that. He became enlightened and he became the Buddha. And so he saw the same thing directly that these old guys had already saw, these past Buddhas or whatever you want to call them. They had already seen it. So that was the thing that was stopping me from making all the connections properly until I did a show with you, and then I had to go back and change my book again after the first show we did because I figured it out finally. So it's so these esoteric teachings date all the way back to Thoth, Hermes. Hermeticism basically is a complete teaching from the that Hellenistic period, roughly about 300 BC, and it kind of went right into Europe, right into the 14 to 1700s. It's there's so much wisdom there. I was blown away as a Buddhist when I first took a peek into that stuff, and I have not read is nowhere near the amount of books that you have read, but it's mind-boggling what's on that side of the fence as well.
Yeah, the the underground stream that the Hermeticists say is this underlying realm that you can access if you want to. And
Yeah,
so you can have people from all around the world have the same teaching and never have talked to each other. So
yeah, yeah.
because they were able to access the underground stream
Yeah.
as
And the Tibetans would call that the dream bardo. So you can go into the bardo and access it and come back out either through dreams, meditation, whatever. So yeah, you're right. It's definitely there's that interconnection. The what's it called? Zeitgeist or whatever. It just kind of goes out into the system.
that guys, yeah.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
So this influenced Gnosticism, all the early Christian stuff, alchemists, everything. Essenes, they had that secret teaching to help sleeping souls awaken, and that's where I had my biggest stumbling block. Is I knew I wrote about the Essenes in my first book, Remember Zen, and I knew that they had secret teachings to help sleeping souls awaken, but I didn't know what those teachings were, and everybody will know kind of by the end of today. And it also the Kabbalists. It went into the Kabbalist teachings that you see in Judaism. That's all that wisdom came from from Egypt. It all came from Egypt, and I knew it was the Kabbalists got it from Egypt as well because they were in exile in Egypt the longest. So there's a good chance that a lot of that came back during the time of Moses or shortly after the time of Moses.
And the Sufis too. Don't forget them.
Yeah, yeah, the Sufis, yeah. That was a bit later, though. You're talking about the Islamic Sufis, yeah,
600 AD.
yeah. So I talked about this Origen Adamanius, who really started the first Coptic church in Egypt, and he was influenced by the Gnostics. He actually was boarded with a lady that was friends with the Gnostics, so he had these basic Gnostic sages coming into his life and into his house all the time, and you can kind of see where his teachings changed. They became much, much more kind of Buddhist-like in nature and understanding. And he taught that you can only return to God after illumination. You have to reach the state of illumination before you can go back to that seventh heaven. You don't get to go back, and the all the work on Hermeticism says the exact same thing, that you have to break free from the globe or from this realm to be able to go to return, and that's what Buddha taught. That's what they all taught basically.
Yep.
So, and he said that Jesus didn't even become divine until after an awakening. So that period in the desert where he was influenced by darkness, just like Buddha was influenced by the daughters of Mara or Mara, it's the same thing. It's the dark night of the soul. They're talking about their dark night of the soul out in the desert basically. So, and then we talk about archons. The interesting thing is that these archons work in all of the realms. Most people don't realize that in Buddhism you have six realms, but you really have seven, and you actually have the exact same seven realms in alchemy or Gnostic teachings, and they're the same thing. If you actually look at, and actually the Gnostic ones are better described and a better description of what that realm actually is than what the Buddhist ones were. Like I wish that the two would merge because if you understand both of them, you get a much clearer picture of what these realms are.
I agree with you.
Yeah,
Because I'd studied Buddhism, and then when I discovered the Nag Hammadi and started reading it, I was like,
it's
"Whoa!"
the same. Yeah,
Like
it's
what?
exact same response I had.
Yeah,
And so the Tibetans called the archons mountain spirits. The same thing. The Muslims call them jinn. Christians call them evil spirits. It's all the same thing.
yeah.
And and the reason why I'm talking about them right now is if I'm going to give you information that'll help you awaken sooner, but you got to have your spiritual foundation right first because the dark night of the soul is real and you have to be able to withstand it. And I think that's why monks used to keep most of these teachings hidden So they wanted to make sure you were ready and you understood it. And then when you actually did the final practice, you were in a monastery around like body monks to kind of shield you from a dark attack, basically. Because I don't know how they find you. They come out of that realm that you just talked about, that slipstream or the bardo, and they find you quickly. Like it's like they find you. They can find any of us. They know where somehow they know where we're all at, and if we enlighten ourselves, they try to throw you off. They can't do it for very long, but they try.
Yeah, I
So,
wrote a movie once, and the opening scene, it was about the Archons. It never got made. And the opening scene was a boxing match. And these two guys start beating the hell out of each other, and the crowd starts going wild and crazy over it. And then I have these like dark parasites coming in from above, right, entering into
yeah.
everybody. And because, you got to be like careful watching horror movies and that kind of thing
Oh
because
yeah, yeah,
they're very,
yeah.
that's how the archons find you is when you get really scared.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And um, so one of the things to have strength because they operate in all the bardos. So like in Tibetan Buddhism, they talk about six bardos. Some schools will talk about eight, but the six main bardos, the three first are while you're alive, and there's three that while you're dead. So Tibetan Buddhists believe from the moment you're born to the day you die, that's a bardo. So all the karma we accumulate during life, we're in a bardo right now, and the archons are here right now. They can mess with you in life if you go to a casino or you're going to um,
Exactly.
really negative type places. They're there. They're at abattoirs, big butcher type facilities. There's archons wherever there's decaying. They like decaying matter, and so the one of the best defenses you can have is fresh flowers. That's why they have incense in all those monasteries and stuff. They hate nice smells.
Yep.
Um, but the most important is basically don't be a pussy, be fearless. Once you're coward and you're scared of everything and you're angry all the time and you got toxic emotions, you're just asking, come on, archons, take over me, because that's what happens. As long as you're loving, peaceful, and fearless, they're not going to really be able to mess with you very much.
And when you hear that nagging voice in your head,
Yeah,
tell you you're not a good person or you screwed up, and you could have done better. What I learned to do is just I just raise my hand, I go out, and it goes.
yeah,
I
yeah,
kick him out. I mean, you're whispering in my ear, and I'm not going to listen to you. So go
yeah,
away. I heard a woman really good. She had a near-death experience. She hit her head on the toilet and passed out. And the first thing she came to when she went up into the upper realm was she walked into like this room and it was full of these short, dark demons. And as she walked through the room, they said, "You're ugly. You're no good. You had a terrible life. You were mean to everybody." And she started arguing with them, saying, "No, no, I wasn't." And the more
yeah,
she argued with them, the more they were just defenseless. So that's
yeah,
what they do. So you have to have kind of defenses against these guys.
yeah. And then the second stage that they can mess with you is in the dream state. So when you have dreams at night and you're just exhausted in the morning and you've had all these horrible nightmares, that's the archons taking you on for another ride and harvesting you some more while you're dreaming. So you got to be careful how to fight them in the dream state as well, and that's quite easy as well. When you have your own power back, they can't even mess with you in the dream state. And also the third one is the meditation state, and they can mess with you in the meditation state as well. That's why you got to really make sure meditate in nature. The best place, all if you read about all the great gurus that ever lived, they all lived in nature. Nature is because that's where the prana comes from that your soul needs. Your Buddha nature needs prana. That's why deep breathing is so important. You gotta pull that from nature. And if you're disconnected from nature, it makes it that much harder to become enlightened.
Yeah, archons don't like nature.
Yeah, no, I think that's why they're trying to destroy it. Maybe
That's
even is
exactly right.
they don't want flowers. They don't want
They don't
pine
want
trees. They don't
anything
want
nice.
any. Yeah,
They want an
yeah,
ugly world with ugly people doing ugly things.
exactly. Yeah. So that's why the Buddhists are so big in cultivating loving hearts and compassion because when you're in that space, they can't mess with you anymore. And then in the death stage, there's three stages there. Is when you're starting to die and you go through all that process, archons can mess with you there. And then when you actually die, there's a point where there's actually you can become enlightened in the death state. But most people, the archons terrify them so much, they end up back in the reincarnation line
Yep.
because they haven't become enlightened. They can't escape this globe until you become enlightened. Buddha taught us that. The Gnostics taught us that. Um, all of the stuff that came out of Egypt was teaching us that. And it's not a new age fluff type thing. It's the fact. You don't escape here until you conquer yourself, basically.
Yep.
And then there's the bardo of becoming. That's just before you take a new body and you start to look at past life, past associations, all those things before you select your next body.
Yep.
So Padmasambhava wrote the Tibetan book of the living and the dead, and it was hidden for 700 years because it tells you how to get through this bardo. It tells you how to just always move forward. Don't let the archons, these guys that you just mentioned, on the side telling you you're bad or trying to give you life reviews. All that crap is BS. Just keep on going. And a Tibetan Lama, High Lama, can come out of the bardo 49 days later and reincarnate again. The average Westerner, we're probably spending as much time in this bardo as we do in physical bodies or in corporeal form.
Like
And
700 years, I believe.
yeah, yeah. So we're getting stuck in places we should have never been stuck in, basically. And that's that El Morey, that the guy in the books that Nicholas Roerich wrote that you amazingly read as well. He warned about that there's a backlog. That's the problem right now, is it's just backlogged with souls in these lower bardos because we're not progressing spiritually down here. Our religions aren't helping us progress spiritually. Hardly anybody's attaining enlightenment, and that's why there's a backlog. But that's going to change soon. We're in the new. We're moving up.
Yeah.
So how do you attain enlightenment? So there's really, you can do the sutra path, and that's kind of like what most Theravada, Mahayana Buddhists would do, where you study sutras, you learn the teachings, and you practice meditation. And in time, you might become enlightened that way. There's the tantric path, and that's where you learn. It's more about moving that life force or the Buddha nature through the chakra system, more complex teachings. That path is very successful. Most people would be shocked if I told you how many Tibetan monks were actually enlightened. You wouldn't. It's more than you think, but they don't go around bragging about it because you won't hear them do that. Um, but there's a lot, and it's because of the Vajra teachings and the Dzogchen teachings that allowed so many people, and it's also why they have the rainbow body when they die, is because they're moving that life force through those five chakras versus all seven. So you see seven spectrums of light as they step out of their body. The other one is the Shakti pot, and I never knew this. I don't know if you knew this, Jay. Yogananda knew Kriya Yoga really well, but he was enlightened by Shaktipat. He left the ashram and then came back, and Shirak Tushra could see that he was troubled, but those guys knew each other before in other lifetimes, and he touched him or did something to him, and Yogananda became instantly enlightened. So sometimes a master can just touch you and do that reset to the Buddha nature, but that's very rarely that happens.
Right.
And even more rare is sometimes they just wake up accidentally. And I think some of these new age publishers, some of them may actually be enlightened, but they're what I call accidentals. Somebody who woke up because it was just their time, but they didn't have a teaching, they didn't really have a practice, and then they sort of backtrack and try to have a teaching, but they didn't really practice one. And so it's not a bad thing. It's just that sometimes those type of teachings aren't very complete, I find, and they're kind of mile wide and an inch deep, sort of.
Yeah.
And then you can do 108 koras around Mount Kailash, and apparently that'll pop you off and take you into the
Better get in shape for that one.
yeah, real good shape. Because yeah, you'd be about 5,000 feet above where you're at right now, and you'd want to have good cardiovascular. I won't stay very long, long on this side, but did you see that image I sent you? Is when these masters die, one of the things that happens is some emit a rainbow body of light, and that's basically when the subtle body and the causal body step out of the physical body. It just because they did Dzogchen teaching so much that it's just like they have a better city and they'll emanate that rainbow body of light, but they only emanate five colors, not seven, because they don't use that top one and they don't work on the bottom one. Most of the um, um, tantra techniques just use those five main chakras. It varies from school to school, but and I think that's why you're seeing these rainbow bodies at the time of death. I've had people write me now and say, "I want my rainbow body now," and it's like, well,
Okay.
don't rush it. Take your time.
Don't ask for it, you might get it.
Yeah. But this guy here, this is Lamazon Kappa, and he's the one who started the Yellow Hat sect in Tibet. So he was another the main three Buddhist reformers of Tibet are Padmasambhava, Atisha, and Tsongkhapa. So if you hear any monk give a teaching, it's usually around a little bit of Milarepa too, but mainly these three guys are the grandfathers of Tibetan Buddhism, I guess you could say. They're all the same life stream, by the way. They're the same life stream. These guys. This guy was Atisha before, and he was Padmasambhava before that. That's quite well known. Like you could talk to probably half of the Tibetan monks will tell you that. Some of them won't, but it's. I think that's right. I've done a lot of research in this, and I think that they are. And I sent you that picture of the ring cell. So another thing that happens when they cremate these people, ring cell forms in the ashes, and they're like little pearl-like substance or crystal, like look like crystals. And this guy's ring cell started emanating light in 2009, and so like that, nobody really understood why, but it should be obvious. But like that doesn't that's never happened before. Like that guy died in 1400 A.D., so 700 years ago, and now his so there's that's how they know somebody's reached higher attainments is when they cremate them. If there's ring cell there, there's a good chance that you're dealing with a living master. And this guy over here, Wei Nung, he was basically the greatest Zen master. He was a Chan master from China, but Zen and Chan are the same thing. He was the greatest master of all of them. This guy might have even surpassed Shakyamuni Buddha in crystal clear, pointing directly at the path. And look, this is his body. This guy died in 700 AD. He's like over 1200 years old, and he didn't decompose. It's because, again, that the causal and subtle body just stepped out of the physical body and it crystallized, or there's something that happens with these higher masters when they pass.
Yeah, it's just like they've drawn so much chi and prana, plasma,
Yeah,
whatever you want to call it, that the which is called the secret fire in alchemy.
yeah,
It does something to the body and it preserves it,
yeah,
man. It's just the craziest, weirdest thing.
yeah, yeah, it is. So I told you what this is really about is when we have these avatars come down from higher places like a Jesus or a Krishna or a Buddha. They bring teachings, but we're the avhuts. We're supposed to rise up now. And when the avhut, which are new souls or younger souls, rise up to the level of Bodhi, there's no difference anymore. So the whole purpose of this planet and the whole purpose of that wheel that I showed you is at some point heaven's coming to earth. They have a term in Judaism, Gan Eden, Gan Eden, which is the Garden of Eden. That's when heaven comes to earth. Well, in Tibet, heaven is called Ganden. That's why that monastery is called Ganden Monastery. Very similar terminology, but it's all about at some point heaven comes to earth where we still go through a dark age and all these other ages, but we don't fall back like we do anymore. It becomes like an ascendant planet almost. I don't want to say it's not 5D. Don't jump onto that narrative, but and it takes time to get there. It's not going to happen next quarter. It's a process.
There's a new book out called The Coming Wave, written by the guy that founded Deep Mind. the
Yeah.
AI program, and you would not believe what's about to happen to the human race. That is
Yeah.
incredibly astonishing. And all these technologies just like bubbling under the surface, ready to break through all at the same time. And it's free energy. It's being able to go from New York to Australia in an hour and a half.
Yeah.
For free with no pollution. And that's not even talking about what's going on the medical front. They have technology right now that because your genes make mistakes as you get older, and so they
Yeah.
reproduce wrong. And they have machines that are already made that are coming out that can reverse all the mistakes of your entire genome. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
there's something really big going on, and it's because we're in the Dwapara Yuga.
Yeah. And what we saw happen since 1700 till now, which that 300-year Sandus period, you're going to see as much happen in the next 30 years, just like you're saying. The next 30 years are going to be mind blowing for everybody. Like it's,
I'm telling you, if you can live 5 more years, you'll probably live another 100. I
yeah,
mean,
it's possible. Yeah.
the rate of technical advance. All right.
Yeah. So this is out of the Emerald Tablets, and like, it really makes me mad. Some people are trying to say that Thoth never existed, that all of this stuff is just made up. They're trying to say Jesus never existed. I personally, I believe Jesus did exist for sure, but I see him more as a Maharishi, this guru, like the Gnostics saw him. This guy was a guru, so we better, because I think that there was a Gnostic kind of community before the time of Jesus. Like the Essenes knew all of these teachings before Jesus came. Some of all of this stuff that Thoth knew was long, long before Jesus. But just read. This is a supplementary from the tablet, and it says that the earth is but a portal guarded by powers unknown to man. Yet the dark lords, the dark archons, hide the entrance that leads to the heaven-born land, and that's what they call the sphere of Arula. That's the seventh heaven. That's what Buddha called peri-nirvana, and only and is guarded by barriers only open to light-born man. What does that say at the bottom? Only open to light-born man. Only enlightened, it should be person, but only enlightened people get out of this realm. You do not leave cyclic existence on planet Earth until you become enlightened. And that's they've been the obviously the Egypts told us this, the Essenes told us this, the Buddhists, everybody's told us this. And it's right there in plain as day in the the supplementary tablet anyway. And then we have when I talk about the Great Awakening that Padmasambhava Bhava predicted, where he said it's going to start in the land of the red men, which is North America, and then we're talking about all these stupas in Colorado that have relics of the Karmapa. Tibetans don't put relics of a Karmapa in a stupa in Crestone. There's got to be a good reason for that, right? There's something more to that than just let's put them over here. There's something
Well,
else.
they outright tell you that that Crestone is this super holy place that they have
No?
are going to make it the place where they release their teachings.
Yeah, yeah, and so the other interesting thing is Yogana or Shirik Twishwar, which this is a different group now. Like this is not a Buddhist group anymore. This is like a Kriya Yoga group.
That's right.
Shirik Twishwar purposely sent Yogananda to North America to start off the Great Awakening, I believe. Yogananda and all these Tibetan monks scattered all over the place. They're here to. They know there's something else bigger going on, and they're building things and they're doing things that
And
in the background.
the same thing with the Taoist masters.
Yeah,
They escaped China and came to America. And now, if you talk to a Chinese Taoist master, you say, "Oh, there's more Taoist masters in America than there are in the entire rest of the world."
yeah, yeah.
So,
But so a lot of this spiritual stuff is kind of man focused, and I always get somebody writing in and saying it's going to be a woman this time. The Kalki's a woman. It's not. I know scripture pretty well, but they
no.
forget about the 21 taras of Atisha, and these are female Buddhas. These are the female Buddhas. There's 21 forms of them in Tibetan Buddhism, and they all emanate from the green Tara. So the white Tara, the red Tara, the yellow Tara, the orange, maroon, even the black Taras, they all originally emanated from the green, which is considered the mother of all liberation. But I believe that these Taras are also going to start appearing. I don't know when. I've done these shows a lot, and I usually get 5 or 6 emails. I'm one of these, and I'm sure you get that. I get a lot of Kalkis. I get a lot of
I,
Christ.
I've met about 50 Kalkis.
Oh, you beat me. I think I'm only at about 20 right now. But how many Christ you got? I've got at least 5 or 6
Oh, yeah.
Christ.
Okay. So they're a dime a dozen.
And it's always funny because they get mad if you don't accept, like,
Exactly. So I
yeah.
I usually try to leave as fast as I can.
There's a Jewish rabbi that I really love, and when they come into his YouTube channels and try to troll them and stuff like that, and say that they're the Kalki or they're the Messiah, he says, "What's your food and drink preference at your coronation?" that's that's it. And one guy even answered what he wanted. He was actually thinking the guy was being serious.
Yes.
So these tars are going to appear too, and that's a good thing because tar is a very powerful thing. Like the balance has to come back. Dark ages are very masculine, and as we go into Dwapara Yuga, you're going to
That's
see
right.
a more the balance is coming back. So we're gonna. I'm quite excited about. I hope before I pass this earth, I get to meet a Tara, and
Yeah.
it might not be just for noble reasons, but it's. I think it would be neat to meet a real living Tara. Like I think it would be cool. It's. I hope.
Robert Lawler, the great scholar, my friend, who's now gone from this world, he studied at that theosophical place in India. He spent like
Yeah.
15 years there because they were trying to get all the knowledge together. And he told me that he says there's four sexes. There's men, women, then there's men within the women, and men within and women within the man. And he said the golden age is ruled by women. The silver age is ruled by men within women within the women, and then the silver age is ruled by men within the men, and then the bronze age is ruled by the women within the men, and the dark age is ruled by men within the women. And you can kind of
Yeah.
see
That's.
that the masculine women are kind of the progenitors of the last age.
Yeah.
And but now with the Taurus coming, you're going to see this like incredible femininity returning to the female human.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And if you ever want to know what a Tara might be like in our past, is if you look like at Rama, Sita was a Tara. You look at Krishna, Lakshmi was a Tara. Um, um, Nagarjuna, that famous Indian from Mahayana master, he was led by the Tara. Atisha was told to go to Tibet by a white Tara, but they weren't in physical form. They were telling them from the other side. So the Taras direct some of these masters very carefully. Tsongkhapa, when he was born and raised in Tibet, he was like a homegrown Tibetan. The white Tara came to him as an old woman.
Yeah.
Um, Padmasambhava, he was the luckiest. He had five in the flesh living with him, so in a cave. Like he, I've
Hey,
always, I've always been a bit jelly of old Padmasambhava. He's,
that sounds tiring.
oh yeah, just let's go do some more Vajra teachings. Yeah,
That's funny. Uh,
yeah. So you can see I'm not that spiritual in some ways. Still, that old mind is still going, right?
yeah.
So the interesting thing about these souls now is they're appearing in digital photography. And if you see the old images you saw in the Indian art, these old wheels, you see it in these souls now. So the wheel of samsara is literally in that light orb,
Yeah,
and
they
it's
call them
plasma.
tiglis.
Yeah.
That's the name that Tibetans have for them. They're plasma forms.
Oh yeah, they're plasma. And if you go into the Shirak Trishar's explanation that he
Yeah.
pulled out of the Rig Veda and the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, he calls it the four or the five aura electricities of the causal body, because this is the causal body right here. This is not the subtle body, it's the causal body. But think about it, aura elect five, that's plasma. He's just because they didn't have the word plasma back then. So that's why how they described it. So when I first did the first podcast, I was saying from Shirak Trisha's point of view, but they're really talking about plasma. So
Yep.
somehow the creator in the great center, because that I don't understand. Nobody will ever truly understand that, but that's your soul. That's the life stream that goes from lifetime to lifetime, gains experience, and it's on its destination back to the great center, back to the seventh heaven that the Gnostics said that's pure white light. That's where we're all going. That's the journey. Is you gain a bunch of information, understanding, and when you go back to the great center, I guess you could say in a way God increases. You add to
Oh,
the
that's right. That's
pool of
right.
God in a way.
God seeks novelty. That's what
Yeah,
God seeks, or whatever
yeah,
you want to call the center of creation.
yeah,
They seek novelty, and the more that you bring to the table when you die, for as far as you having a novel experience, that increases God's knowledge and power.
yeah. And that's oneness. That's
That's
we're
right.
all one. We're all one. Even the new age fluff peddlers on the internet, they're still our brothers and sisters. We're
They
all
are.
one.
They are. Sometimes you got to hold your nose, but
Yeah, but it's still they're still there.
yeah,
Yeah. So that soul's journey is back to the great center. And that's what the Gnostics called the great center beyond space, time, and false morality.
right.
The Gnostical, the not the Gnostical, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene said it the best. That Jesus came to help souls to return to the great center beyond space, time, and false morality.
That's
It's
my
kind of like
favorite. That's my favorite of the gospel, Gnostic gospels.
mine too. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, you probably remember that exact line then too. It's quite profound, really. It
Yep.
enters the body. This thing enters the body months before after conception. But I think if you read the Tibetan Book of the Living and the Dead, where Padmasambhava is in that third phase of the bardo, when he says select your parents carefully,
Yeah.
and he's going down that hall selecting which parents he's going to take, and they're all in the embrace. So that thread is made as soon as conception happens. It's just that the physical body's not ready yet for the indwelling soul to come in, but there's some kind of thread there. I don't really. It's that.
It's called the Shishuna, and
Yeah,
it's a thread of plasma that comes down from the plasma cloud, and it comes down to here to the top of your head. It's right now we both have it going on,
yeah,
and when the baby is born, it has that soft spot right here, and that's
yeah.
because this hasn't finished forming completely yet. The Shishuna, the
Has
connection
to come in. Yeah,
the physical body and the upper realms. And when you die, you know your light body, not your light body, your plasma body collapses in and goes up
yeah,
spine and right out through the top of your head and travels up that Sushumna, which is the tunnel that you see. You're going through the Sushumna and goes
yeah,
back into the higher realms, the seven
yeah,
heavens.
yeah. So another thing, I think I can explain this one quite well that most people probably couldn't, because I really did have a real near death experience. I was gone. They barely got. I'm like what happened to me is about a 2 or 3% survival rate. So I was very lucky to even be here doing this presentation. But it was my death experience was a little bit different. Once you cross that bardo and you go right from your body and you go into the I guess the astral realm or
Yep,
the first bardo.
yep,
Um, if you're a real bad person and you've done shitty things all your life, you sink. You instantly sink in that bardo
that's
and you
right.
go to the lower realms.
That's right.
If you're a fairly good person, you might kind of linger around the body for a few days and then go through the bardo and go into a reincarnation cycle and come out. But if you're one of those enlightened beings and you've become enlightened, you just instantly shoot up towards the sun, out into space. You go way past the speed of light. You
Take a
go up
right turn.
Yeah, and you go back to the seventh realm. That's what this is all about. That's the realm, the seventh heaven that's in Judaism, or the seventh heaven in Islam. That's where we all eventually go back to, and that's
Yeah.
the whole purpose of becoming enlightened.
And
And
New
there's
Agers really hate it when you tell them that that you go down if you're a
yeah.
bad person. They
Oh
can't.
yeah, I know. It's
Yeah, so
yeah.
there's gonna be a
Yeah,
lot of
because they no responsibility, right? They're these snowflakes that believe that there's just I'm special. It doesn't matter what I've done. If I ask for forgiveness, I'm not going. You can ask for all the forgiveness you want. If you've done a lot of bad things, karma doesn't work that way. You're going to sink, and you're going to come back, and you're going to eventually learn your lesson. And even if you end up in a hell realm, you're still going to come back
yeah,
eventually. It's not
absolutely.
permanent.
That's right.
Yeah. So the plasma universe affects human consciousness, and it's really at the quantum level. It's not so much if you think a constellation or a star affects your consciousness or your being, and it's really far away, and you think, how can a star or a cluster that's 1,000 light years away be affecting me in the same way as one that's only 400 light year, 4 light years away? And there's a thing in quantum mechanics where the state of matter, of particles, whether it be electron or a proton, you can change the state over here and it'll change halfway across the universe somewhere else instantly. And
Because it's
that's
all
what
connected by
astrology,
plasma. And
yeah, it's plasma
that's why
again. It's,
when they look at spiral galaxies, they realize that the outside of the galaxy is moving at the same exact rate as the inside of the galaxy. When it should be, if it's a spiral motion, the outside should be moving faster than the inside.
yeah,
But not because the entire galaxy is a plasma cloud.
plasma,
It's
yeah,
held
exactly.
together by it. And people have to understand that.
Yeah. And so you got to really understand how that plasma affects your light body, because your soul is light, and it's light from the universe. And you think, oh, it's just new age fluff. And I think that's why astrology became and alchemy kind of got pushed to the sides, because when scientists started becoming arrogant, they just couldn't accept that there's some invisible thing there. There's something more, and they just pushed it aside. And it's probably one of the most important branches of science that we pushed aside. Like
Yeah, I would say it is, and
it's
uh,
shameful, really.
it is shameful. And but this Kali Yuga again, they're
Yeah,
in,
it's the Kali Yuga for sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
they didn't understand it, and their tests were all wrong. So
yeah.
and then but like go on, I won't say it.
So this thumbprint of creation, the fingerprint of creator is everywhere. It's
Yep.
the way the brain cells look exactly the same as the way galaxies look. There's this repeating pattern throughout all of creation and there's more to it than just random chaos. Like I used to be really into chaos theory, but wait a minute, there's something way beyond just randomness going on here, and there's like intelligent design basically. It's
Folks,
really
you're basically getting this is the secret of alchemy is what we're getting to right now. This is after many, many years of studying alchemy, these are the conclusions that I've reached also. So keep going.
so I can be call myself an alchemist soon. Yeah. So there's the effects of magnetism and light really affect the body. And there was a Canadian scientist who did research where he created negative fields and positive magnetic fields and proved that people's it was the opposite. When you were in a negative field, you were positive, and when you were in a positive field, you became agitated and restless. He proved this like way back. He wrote a lot of books. This guy was actually quite an amazing, way before his time scientist that realized that magnetics and plasma, because when you talk about magnetics and electric, it's plasma
All the same.
that it affects consciousness.
That's right. Yep.
And then Emoto realized that the energy just from your thoughts affect how these things form. So you can imagine what happens if you had the power of a creator, how you could form a multiverse and all of this perfection that's out there.
Well, when you add plasma fields to water, you get some absolutely astonishing effects.
Yeah.
That's only now coming out now,
Yeah.
but literally um, creates tears in the time, space-time continuum.
Yeah.
That powerful.
Yeah. So that light orb within all of us is why you're connected to each other and why you're connected to the multiverse. Is that those you can have two like particles hundreds of thousands of light years apart, and they can change instantaneously. And this branch of quantum entanglement or quantum theory is pretty accurate because they can use lasers to kind of do the testing. They're I think it's the modern scientists involved in this type of work are actually pretty brilliant what they've come up with lately.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
Yeah,
And there,
but
and
they don't know.
what's happening lately is these guys are starting to use spiritual terms to
Yeah,
describe their experiments. It's quite amazing to watch
yeah,
because they're at a loss to find a word that will explain it.
yeah. So really, Buddha's teaching on dependent origination, how we're connected to everything, but nothing's permanent, it is basically he's talking at the quantum level how everything is interconnected through light. It's all about plasma. It's we're connected by the light.
That's
It's as
right.
simple as that. Buddha, and so in the Buddhist void, it's not just what's around us physically, it's also the moon, the stars, the whole universe. The void and the Taoist Tao is everything. It's all of these great masters, Lao Tzu, Buddha, they all told us this a long time ago. We just kind of missed the real important things.
Yeah, I think as you enter into it and live inside the Kali Yuga, you just don't see it. It's just
Yeah,
an impossible thing to see. And then, the people who do sense it or see it, we think of them as crazy or
yeah.
mental institutions and things.
So karma itself is a form of quantum entanglement. So if
Right.
I did something bad to you, um, our souls, our light souls, are still there, and so that madness it'll come back to me. It's
Absolutely.
there's a that's how karma, the laws of cause and effect work. Is they're working at the quantum level. We kind of think we can duck and dodge it or ask for forgiveness. You can't. It's good to ask for forgiveness and try to be on a better path, but it's still coming for you. You still gotta live through your bad deeds. It's just the way it
Right.
goes. There's
No
no
doubt
escape.
about it. It's just better not to cause bad karma at all. Just try to
Yeah,
be even keeled in your life and don't attack people and say bad things about them.
yeah.
And you know,
Krishna even warned that good karma, if you do too many good deeds, that you can start creating these entanglements where, like, give an example. Say you fell in love with a girl when you're young and say, "I'm never going to leave you. We're going to be together forever." You might have just created an entanglement that she's got five more lifetimes and you're ready to go, but you know what I mean? You've created an
oh yeah,
entanglement for yourself. So
yeah.
you got to tiptoe through life basically and do
You got to
the
be a
best.
Zen master and know that it's probably better to just shut up.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I'm kind of retiring from this. I just want to shut up now. I've been doing this for 20, it took
I
me 35
certainly
years.
understand that. The only reason I'm doing it is because I know we've entered into the Para Yuga, and I think now this stuff will finally be understood by everybody. Whereas just even 20, 30 years ago, it was like,
Yeah,
what are you talking about? Right?
yeah. When I first talked about what in the laws of Manu about the binary, I got hit so hard about it's coming this month. They would show me pictures. You're a liar. You work for the Illuminati. This is like 18 years ago. You work for the Illuminati. You're lying. And then when I told everybody it's not 2012, it's probably closer to 2020, I got hit with that. Like they believe this false stuff so much that they'll defend it with just they'll be nasty and everything defending what these new age fluff peddlers tell them like you're going to be twinkle your way to five dimension next year and there's going to be great
It's
times
like
and
we're on acid all the time. Like, I don't want to be on acid all the
so when you look at the most of the yoga schools, whether it be Tibetan or Indian, they break it down. They break the seven bodies of the. You got seven chakras and you got seven bodies. They break it down to three to make it a little bit more simpler. And that's the causal body. That's that soul orb. And the causal body actually has a light body, which is your subtle body. And your subtle body is what steps out that creates that um, rainbow effect when you pass. If you were doing your Dzogchen teachings, that's how you emanate a rainbow body. It's your, and then that light body then interfaces to your gross physical body. So if you don't have a soul, all of this other stuff doesn't work. You think that your central nervous system and the way your brain, where a traditional doctor might think he understands how that works. There's a whole nother level where there's a soul with a subtle body that kind of interfaces to the physical body. There's a whole nother level there that's
Yeah,
going on.
the three in Egypt, the causal is the Ba, the subtle is the Ku, and the gross is the Ka.
Ah, I didn't know that. I've never heard that. That's
Yeah.
thanks for it's interesting.
And the Ku is, which is the subtle body, is a bird because it can fly
Oh,
back, it can fly in astral realms and all that.
oh, okay. I'm not going to go change that one. I've covered it anyway, but that's interesting because they actually had names for it too. Like it's all the same, right? It's just different, came
Yep.
from different
Yeah.
masters, but it ended up being the same thing. So that when you hear about the five koshas and stuff, they're dealing with just those five main chakras. So the techniques are dealing with the five, not all seven. And then this is the causal body here, and this is where your Shirakatrishwar, and comes out of ancient documents. They knew this 5,000 years ago, and modern, like some scientists watching this right now might still be thinking, I don't know if I really believe this, but it's the causal body is broken down into five oral electricities, and they actually show them how they fold over with each other and then interface into the light body. They explain this in complete detail basically in these documents. And Shirak Tishwar said that modern science would not be able to measure these until Treta Yuga, which is still, we're just going into Dwapara Yuga. So Treta Yuga is 2,400 years away yet.
Yeah.
I think we'll know sooner maybe, but it's hard to say. He figured it's a long time yet.
I bet he's right, actually.
Yeah. And this is the place where your real consciousness resides. So when you die and you leave your brain and your body behind, this guy goes on a ride. And if you've ever had an astral dream, look down at your hands. They're not your hands. You got a body, you have a light body, but look at your hands. They're not your hands. They're just not your hands. It's your light body. You're not taking your physical body on an astral trip. You're only taking your light body.
That's right.
So, and then he said that an atom under the universe or under the influence of chit, which is universal knowledge, forms a calm state. And this is where the Gnostics were right about the wisdom mind or Gnosticism, which is basically wisdom, but it's not getting a bunch of PhDs or a bunch of degrees, which they do help increase your wisdom. It's the understanding of emptiness, understanding of true emptiness, not just the concept of it, but where you actually see how everything's interconnected. Because once you see how everything's interconnected in the universe, your mind's not making distinctions anymore and living in that duality. It's just calm. You're chill now, man. You're not making distinctions anymore, and that only comes with the development of the wisdom mind. That's why the Gnostics and the Buddhists were right about this. Is you gotta have the wisdom mind. But the next thing, this is the one that'll really blow you away, Jay, is that atom under the universal influence of love forms polarity. So this thing here does not form a positive side and a negative side and a neutral side until love is there. So it's like you said, the alchemists used to say, if you don't have love, you can't do this. This is why, because if you don't have polarity inside, you can't switch this polarity and become enlightened. You have to have love before you become enlightened. It's that simple.
Yeah, that's when
It's
the alchemist would get captured by the evil king and get tortured to get the secrets of
yeah.
alchemy. Finally, the alchemist would say, Dude, I could give you all the secrets in the world, but it will never work on you.
Yeah. And
Yep.
it even says, I think, I don't know if it's the Upanishads where it says that it actually gets magnetized like iron filings is how they describe it.
Yep.
Like and this is a light ball of light that gets a polarity and everything. So you have to do things down on in your each incarnation, especially love, to be able to get out of here. You can't be full of hate and anger and be a jerk all your life and expect that something's positive is going to happen from it. So this is the seven chakras, and you can see the portal to the oneness is your crown chakra, and the soul seat is just below the navel. So this is when you're born, it attaches to the soul seat, and you see that this polarity here. You get a plus and a minus. That's got a reverse. That's why Kriya Yoga, Dzogchen teachings, the all the Vajra teachings, the teachings in the Kalashakra teach you how to flip that. You got to flip that polarity at the right time for it to come up, and it won't come up the central nervous system permanently unless there's the total lunar eclipse, because the wind channels are masculine and feminine, and the moon and the sun is masculine and feminine. When those alignments, plasma alliance occur, it creates a tunnel, and that tunneling effect that's the optimum time to do it, and it's the only time. Buddha became enlightened during a total lunar eclipse, and I'll show you how in a minute here. So it's affected by magnetics. This soul inside us is affected by all the cosmos, eclipses. It's affected by the yuga cycles. Everything that's going on in the cosmos is affecting this. And that's why the ancients were so big into astronomy. That's why Göbekli Tepe is really an astronomical calculator. They needed to know the astronomy so that they could do the other things. It was they knew this stuff 12,000 years ago somehow. They definitely knew it 5,000. I think they knew it right up into that guy with the, I call him the Buddha of Karahan Tepe now. And everybody else can use that term. Troll the sort of traditional scientists, because there's something more to that guy than we're being told as well. So, and this is where they use the singing bowls to open up different chakras. So, rum, every chakra vibrates at a different frequency. So they're taking in that God light, and they can it's like a prism. They can divide down those frequencies. And if you're, say, stuck in your heart chakra and there's a blockage there, they can use a singing bowl, or like they use the Ankh. I believe the ones in Egypt use the Ankh. I think the Ankh is basically doing what a singing. I don't know for 100%. I'm the only one saying that, but I'm pretty sure that the Ankh is used in the same way as a Tibetan singing bowl was used. So in the process of enlightenment, this guy here must go below the root chakra, change polarity, and come up. And Buddha left us clues. Buddha almost was ready to die. When he was sitting under the Bodhi tree, he gave up on life. He was almost literally dead. And it's because what happened is that nature sank to the lowest point below the lowest chakra and flipped and came up. So he suddenly became enlightened. And it was on a full moon night under a Bodhi tree. But it was more than just a full moon night. It was a total lunar eclipse. So you see what happens there? It's got to go down, flip polarity, and then come up during an eclipse.
Cool.
So everybody knows in the story that he awakens during a full moon. The Vesak festival, where they celebrate the birth, the death, and the enlightenment of the Buddha, is on the Vesak festival on the full moon of May, sometimes April. But what everybody misses is it was a blood moon. I know for a fact that it was a blood moon. This is what I know for a fact. This part, without any doubt, I know for a fact that this is what happened. And then when I started looking back, it's in all the documents. In the Kalashakra Tantra, he tells everybody this. It's clear as day, even in the fragments. And so, what is the Kalashakra Tantra? A lot of people don't know much about it. It was the separate teaching that Buddha gave to the first Kalki king. And he came up to the surface apparently with 90 rishis, 90 holy men, and Buddha came. They met in some stupa in India, and he gave them the teaching. But this wasn't the teaching that he gave openly to all the other sangha because we were in the dark age. It wasn't time. It was like why Padmasambhava hid the Tibetan Book of the Living and the Dead for 700 years. It just wasn't time. We were still deep into the dark age. So, and I don't really know how large it is, but to give you an example, some people say it's 12,000 verses, and you know how in the Rig Veda they use the two verses, the hymns of the Rig Veda are written in two verses. Um, this one was, they say is, I've heard is 60,000 verses. So it's roughly, it's bigger than the Bible. It would be roughly about just a little bit over half the size of the Mahabharata. So a pretty big document, right? It
Yeah.
wasn't small. And it had the interworkings of the atom. It had the Buddhist equivalent of unified field theory. It had the mathematics for predicting eclipses forever. Um, it was a major document, and we only have fragments. It all, like everything, we don't have the original document today. But um, I say this humbly: this book, Hidden Teaching that I wrote, it's in this book. What, not all of it, but I'm pretty sure I've captured probably 90% of what's in Kalachakra Tantra in that book. Um, won't know until we actually see the real one, but we might see it someday because as the prophecy goes, they say the people from Shambhala come to here. I don't know if they come from another planet or they come from the surface or whatever. And the true wealth in our future will come from the people of northern Shambhala. That's in the prophecies. It's so some of this free energy and all this others, it might actually be might come from there. I don't know for a fact, but it's interesting though, right?
Yeah, could be.
So, um, so we only have fragments of this teaching now, and it has the mathematics for predicting eclipses to infinity. Why did they want to predict eclipses so carefully, right? So they say the grandfathers of time watch over the world from there. I don't think the Earth is hollow because there's a big bulge at the equator, and if it was completely hollow, it could still happen. But I think it's like vuggy capacity, where there's like maybe big areas where they can build cities underground or something like that, and it's more like a base. I don't know. It's
Well,
I
I'll tell
don't.
you what, I've got really good evidence. Um, the mounds in Olympia, Washington, and the Great Sand Dunes in southern Colorado. Uh, Somebody's hollowing out mountains in the past, and
Yeah,
that's all I know. I can prove it. They're,
yeah,
they're definitely
for
hollowing
sure.
out mountains and living there. And of course, the Hopi say that they were taken into the mountain at the catastrophe and saved by the ant people who are
Yeah,
there. People that lived inside the mountain.
yeah. And this Robert Thurman, I think he teaches at
I know
he
Robert.
teaches. Do you?
Yeah, he's Uma Thurman's dad.
Yeah. Okay. Well, he said that there's 300 million people in Shambhala.
Yep.
And I believe him because he's got that inside ear with the Tibetan monks. They'll tell him things that they wouldn't tell me or you. And his whole life is basically teaching stuff that Tsongkhapa taught. If you go to that, he just teaches pretty much what Tsongkhapa taught.
Oh yeah, I
Very
interviewed him
interesting.
for 4 hours one time.
Oh, lucky. Oh, yeah. Was it interesting?
Oh man, it was mind blowing. That's where
Yeah.
I realized that Shambhala was probably inside the Himalayas. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, you know,
Well, they say that they're below the Himalayas, below the ice fields of Himalayas. So there's something there, and you know how when Babaji and those guys just suddenly appear, and
yeah,
how Padmasambhava just suddenly appeared. I
yeah,
think they're just like there's a connection there for sure.
I think so.
And the other interesting thing, this will probably pique your interest because you did a film on the Kalki, is that it's ruled by you see the 25 kings, Kalki kings, but also people talk about 32 kings. Apparently, the first seven kings were wisdom kings, and then there's 25 Kelki kings after. And each Kelki king rules for 100 years. And guess what? Buddha was 2,500 years ago. So we should be getting close to the time of the Kalki. Like, I don't know if it'd be 40 or 100 years from now, but I think we're getting close. It could be 400 years though too. So
Yep.
it's hard to, and the last Kelki king is Rudra Chakran. And the Tibetans call him, what was the Tibetan name? Dragpo, and that's Padmasambhava.
Right.
So this last guy, the Kalki avatar, is Padmasambhava, and that's why I made the link that I think he's Krishna. I think that
Makes sense.
Krishna can sometimes send just a plenary portion, like just a little bit into the system where he's still in Vaikuntha, but there's like a Tsongkhapa or there's an Atisha or whatever doing their deeds. And he only rarely comes as a full vested avatar like he did when he was Rama or Krishna. I
Right.
don't know for a fact on that, but it's
I think you're right, actually.
yeah. I think I'm close. And here's the interesting one that you're really gonna like. This is an actual prophecy from Padma. I don't know if it went right back to 700 AD, but there's a prophecy that it says that the end or this guy comes in 2424. Now, what a weird date, right? Why I tell you why that date is weird is I say 2024. That's what I told you, and you did this shows on that 400 minor cycle.
Yeah,
So it's just interesting that there's a 400-year minor cycle exactly plus. Like, what a weird number, right? Like that's a weird number,
it
a
is.
very weird number. So it could possibly be still 400 years away. I don't know.
Yeah.
If, based on my emails I receive, there's many of them here right now. So interesting thing about the Kalashakra Tantra is it states that during a lunar eclipse, the energy, the fields increase 1,000-fold. So um, I guess you could say the effects from the alignment creates like a tunnel that actually increases good energy or bad energy even, but the things increase. There's a because it's a plasma tunnel. Once this Earth is actually plasma too. It's when it's in alignment, it's the moon, the sun, and the Earth. That's just a big plasma alignment, and things change. The way the wind channels work, which are female and masculine, change during in the Kalashakra Tantra. They call the Ida and the Pingala the Nadis and the Bindu. So they use different names, but they're talking about the same thing. And guess what? The Egyptians had a different name for those as well. And one is feminine and one is masculine. One side of your wind channel is masculine and one is feminine. So when there's an alignment, those channels get canceled out. So that ball inside can rise easier. That's why all of these sites were built. That's what they were doing in Göbekli Tepe, I believe, 13,000 years ago. They were predicting when the eclipse would come, so they would have a couple weeks to prepare and get ready for it.
Makes
And
sense.
the Dakinis in Shambhala only perform the esoteric tantra practices during total lunar eclipses, not solar eclipses, only during lunar eclipses. So this is in the Kalashakra Tantra. I'm not making this up to fit my theory. This was the first thing I found um, when I went looking for it. It was in the Kalashakra Tantra. So to try to explain what happens is everybody knows that we've got these wind channels, and this is why people talk about the serpent rising in Kundalini yoga and stuff like that. It's not really a serpent, and people try to make it demonic and all those silly things. It's these channels. They go around each chakra like this, and one terminates in the left side of the brain, and the other terminates in the right side. They have polarity. One's masculine, one's feminine. So the Pingala is masculine, and the Ida is feminine. So when you get a masculine sun or a feminine moon, and it's the opposite in Kalashakra versus Vedic. One's, but it doesn't matter because the same thing would occur anyway. So when you get an alignment like this during an eclipse, that tunneling effect affects your physical body. So that orb within can flip and rise up to the crown, top of the crown much easier. This is the key. This is what we missed. This is what we're missing with all these sites. Everything is this. So when the Kundalini rises, it's not really a serpent uncoiling. It's just that dormant energy of your Buddha nature, basically flipping polarity and coming up. And it comes up pretty quickly.
It's plasma.
Yeah, it's all this plasma again. Yeah, everything's plasma. The whole damn thing is plasma. It's interesting, but you're right. It's all plasma. The whole thing. So the potential for enlightenment is timing. So Krishna once said, "Love and wisdom are equal." So he was touching on developing the wisdom mind and the importance of love, so that that Buddha nature, that soul, had the right thing. What I say is timing and technique are also just as equal. So if you can master love, wisdom, timing, and technique, you'll be a master of your own destiny. Remember those three things: love, wisdom, timing, and technique. Those are the four golden things you need to understand to become enlightened in one lifetime.
And of course, do it on a full lunar eclipse.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
Right.
missed that part. So total lunar eclipse, optimum time for shifting the Buddha nature within. You must naturally bring the mind to rest. You can't go out and watch one of these things and be fighting with the mind. I got to stop my mind. No, no, this is where emptiness and understanding, where you just sit to sit again. There's no, your mind has to stop. You can't go out and watch one of these things with the mind still racing around, making distinctions and choosing between this and that and all the things that the mind loves to do. And it must flip and sink below that first chakra. And that's the key that Buddha left. He almost died. He was going to give up. And Wei Neng or Huey Nung, he was only a boy when he became enlightened, and he was hauling firewood, and he was completely exhausted from hauling the firewood. And he heard one line of the Diamond Sutra, and he became enlightened at like 12 or 13 years old. And it's because it sank low. So play yourself out before these eclipses happen. That's why they built Stonehenge and all these different megaliths. They wanted to know a couple of weeks before they came so they could start playing themselves out, doing the higher practices and preparing themselves, basically. It's something
All
you
right.
can't just.
Okay, folks, the next lunar eclipse, full total lunar eclipse, is on March 14th, and you'll be able to see it from America, the Pacific, Western Europe, and Western Africa. And then the next one is on September 7th, and you'll be able to see that from, looks like, the West Coast.
Thanks for saying that, because that one's really important, Jay. I'll tell you why. Do you remember in 2014 and 15 we had those tetrads, four lunar eclipses?
Oh,
Like,
yeah, incredible.
and, and then 2 years later, or a year and a half later, we had three more. That's not going to happen for another 1,700 and some years. That's a rare event. And then we had the moon or the Jupiter going into the belly of Virgo and the birth and all the revelation stuff playing out. It's all of these are signs, and I believe that the sign that ends this March, this eclipse, because eclipses, lunars and solars balance each other out. And I believe that this eclipse is not going to change the world, and we're not going to be in 5D or have a solar flash or anything. I think this one's really important because this one might be the first one we experience in the early days of Dwapara Yuga. That's my guess.
You're talking
I
about
could
the
be wrong.
March 14th one?
Yep. Yeah.
So,
Go go out and watch this one, folks. This one, and do the right teachings and understand this. Don't just race out to do it. Be ready. And this one's going to be strong.
yeah,
I
and
believe.
let us know what happens because, if we can get enough people to go out on March 14th and do these exercises and ceremonies, um, put comments on this video when you do it. So I want to hear all about it, and I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
14th, and I'm looking forward to it. In fact, well, it's interesting because one of my favorite film of all time, of course, is 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is essentially about this astronaut goes through these experiences and comes out as an enlightened being, right?
That's one of my favorite movies too. I like that
Well, it
movie.
opens up with a lunar eclipse.
Yeah.
That's the very first thing in the movie.
And you know what, Jay? A lot of these other societies and stuff know this. What I'm telling you right now, I know that very high lamas in Tibet know it. I know there's a few Taoist masters that know it. They don't know it to this extent, though. The descriptions are kind of weak in their literature. They know it. I'm pretty sure the Kriya Yoga people know it of yoga because one of their members wrote me once and said, "How do you know all our secrets?" And I'm like, "I'm not a member. I don't. This is just what I know." And so they people know this, and I think the other side know this as well, because it magnifies universal energy. So if you can freak people out during an eclipse with a false flag or a war or whatever, it magnifies the negative stuff. In ancient India or China, they used to have people when a solar eclipse would happen, bang pots and try to scare the dragon away from eating. Like they made it a fear time rather than the best thing you can do during a total solar eclipse is go out and think about a beautiful future and pray and meditate and just think that because it's going to magnify 100,000 times.
I'll give you an example of what you're saying, and I can't remember the guy's name. He's a famous French astrophysicist, and he was in the Paris Observatory, I believe is in the mid 50s, and he was
I
working
know.
with the pendulum, the pendulum thing, and he was watching it and doing all sorts of things with it, and at like 10:42 in the morning, suddenly the pendulum just for a second began moving sideways. And he's like,
Yeah.
what's going on here? This is impossible, right? And he's all mystified. And then decided to go to lunch. And so he went out to a sandwich shop or something. And the waiter goes, well, did you watch the lunar eclipse? And he goes, oh, I forgot there was a lunar eclipse today. He said, what time did it happen? And sure as hell, it was exactly the time that
Time. Yeah.
because what's happening in eclipses is the plasma field is being interrupted.
Yeah, exactly. It's a tunnel. It's a plasma tunnel. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you're allowed to do things are allowed to move more easily in that brief period. And
Yeah.
we know about all the ancient beliefs about don't go out on a lunar eclipse and all this stuff. So even the ancients are like aware of this in some way.
Yeah. And I think they tried to make it fear-based a bit too, just to prevent, to
Sure.
make this like a dark time rather than a positive time. It's
Yeah.
I did a show once where I just looked at showing people how many wars and stuff were started just around solar eclipses. Kurukshetra war with Krishna, there was a solar eclipse. Day 14, they had a solar eclipse. So
Yeah, it's quite amazing.
yeah. So this is I'll go through this quick where I said Krishna said love and wisdom are equal. I'm saying today you got it, timing and technique are just as equal. And if you master all four, enlightenment's going to come a lot quicker. Don't make it a rush. You got to get rid of the hate and you got to have love and you got to have all these other things. Don't rush it. Just take your time and you'll get there eventually. So there's a deeper meaning of love and wisdom. We kind of went through all this, but so don't play the strongman game. You know when you used to go to the amusement park and you'd hit the hit the thing and the bell would or the ball would travel up and you try to hit that. Well, that's what we're kind of doing with our meditation techniques. A lot of Kundalini yoga and stuff. They try to pull that life force up through the Shushanam, the central, basically
Yeah.
your central nervous system, basically,
Yep.
and they pull it up and they pull it up, but you also got to be able to bring it low at the right time. If you can't bring it low, pulling it up all the time, so it's kind of like you might be hitting the ball, but the ball comes right back down to here again, and you hit it again, and it goes up again, and it comes back down. That's where we're getting caught in our meditation techniques. Is meditation should remove the obstacles of the mind and the physical body to reveal the Buddha nature. And a lot of times we're doing meditation and we're not going to reveal the Buddha nature because we're still doing the wrong technique. So there's a ancient one that I think a lot of the Taoists use. It's called the Secret of the Golden Flower. Have you ever heard of that meditation?
Oh my goodness, yes.
That's when you practice your breath. So on your in breath, you're doing like kind of like pranayama breathing.
Yep.
You're always making that wheel or that orb go forward, turn. So the wheel always turns, and then you can slowly start moving it to different chakras, but always have it turn forward. And when you can do that just effortlessly through all your chakras, and you can stop your mind during an eclipse, you're going to get there very quickly.
Yeah, I learned a really interesting meditation technique years ago that I practice. And what I do is I'll breathe in, and when I'm breathing in, I'm taking in all the light through my eyes, and I'm hitting the back of the eye, right?
Yeah.
And then I hold it for another breath, and then on the third breath, I shoot it out. And I just repeat this over and over and over, and it's very effective. I learned it from a yogi in India, and
Yeah.
I'm going to use that technique on the next total lunar eclipse.
I'll give you another clue. Wear yourself out. Start writing a book just before. Wear yourself. Be so tired that your mind stops. Because
Ah,
that's where the
great
trick Buddha
idea.
left. He gave up. His mind just stopped. You don't have to fight with the mind so much. Just tire it out. Play it out, and it'll stop. If you're tired enough, it'll stop.
Well, that's why I exercise so much because it stops my mind from
Yeah.
moving. So I think you could be
Yeah.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Get tired before the lunar eclipse so you're all mellowed out and then do it. And who knows? Maybe it will change the world here.
Yeah. And then some have the techniques to bring that energy down, and that's where you talk about the four drops in tantra practices. Um, the Dzogchen teachings really do some of that movement of the energy. That's why they're so effective. And you can use mantras, prostrations, all other these techniques. But the Tibetan monks actually have too, in my view, they have too many techniques now. And you can actually go into monasteries and on the rock floor of these caves, there'll be the floor will be worn solid granite rock from monks doing 100. Like Tsongkhapa did so many prostrations. Apparently, his shoulders were blowing out from doing so many. So you can kind of overdo this as well, and that's why I say if you're really interested in that, read my book because you can get there sooner without so many practicing so many techniques.
And don't be
They have
afraid.
all kinds of techniques to bring more light into the wind channels and everything. There's a much simpler way, I think my way is actually simpler than it's kind of like the secret of the golden flower, but it's even more simple. And part of it's just tiring yourself out. Play the mind out.
Yep.
Play the mind out.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't become a fanatic. Do it slowly,
Yeah.
easy. You'll get there. You'll probably get there easier if you don't become a fanatic. I think all that stuff that you were talking about, that's just again left over from the Kali Yuga. They
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
had to do hundreds of prostrations every day, and
Yeah.
probably maybe they did in those times. So
Yeah. And then the nice thing though about the Kriya Yoga and the secret of the golden flower is they're spinning that ball inside all the time. So when you're able to do that and you're able to sink it low, then you get the hook. Once it goes below, it has to see the ball has to go below the root chakra, change polarity, and then it goes up and stays up forever. You're no longer stuck in this reincarnation cycle. So that's the other technique. So you've got your seven chakras and you've got your soul, your causal body there with plus and minus because you've developed the wisdom mind by this point and you've developed loving heart. And you see how it flips? It goes below, flips, and then comes up. And then you get the expanded. That's why Thoth has that ball on top of his head, which they call the moon seat. It's like they knew this. The Egyptians knew this. Buddha knew this. And you do all this during a total lunar eclipse. Don't phone me and say you're going to do it during a partial because there's too much spillage over in a partial. Don't do it during a solar. Um, lunar. The Buddha said that all Buddhas attain enlightenment at night, and this is why.
Very cool.
So these past masters left the clues. Buddha followed a very extreme path of yoga, attained enlightenment on a full moon night, reached that low point, and so did Wei Ning when he was hauling firewood. So that's where you play yourself out. So when you play yourself out, start writing one of your next books like 3 days before. It might be a bad idea, but play the mind out.
Yep. Stay
That
close.
other book, that book I sent you, the other one today,
Yep.
did you get that? I
I'm
was writing that book. I was writing that book when I went out and looked at a lunar eclipse. We'll just leave it at that. It played me out enough to figure it out. Hey, Jax. Sorry, I got a bad dog here. So the ancients knew about this timing and technique. They knew this, and they knew how to bring that energy up. And when there's a lunar eclipse, the Shushanam region becomes like a neutral because the masculine and the female are canceled out by the eclipse of the masculine moon and the female sun, or in the Kala chakra it's the opposite way, but they cancel out each other, and that's why this is when you do it. This is why all these sites are built all over the world. I'll show you how they all worked, but it's why.
Yeah.
And this is the Kala chakra tantrum. We won't spend a lot of time on this, but everybody knows that the three poisons of Buddhism, greed, ignorance, and hatred, that's what generates either positive karma or negative karma. So whatever you're doing through living, basically, it determines, are you dropping down into the lower realms or are you rising up into the higher realms? And they divide it into six realms. You've got the God realm, and this is not the seventh heaven yet. This is not God realm like the of all white light, but it's a realm that we're still in while we're before we escape this realm, basically. And there's a demigod realm, and then there's the human realm, and then the lower realms are uh, the hell realm, which is, I think there's like 17 or something in one sect, and there's also the hungry ghost realm, and that's why sometimes when you see ghosts appear in your house or whatever, it's just souls that haven't crossed over. They're still in the ghost realm, and they're just shifting in and out of this realm, and you literally see them sometimes. And then there's the animal realm, which is we share that realm. The human realm and the animal realm. We're in the same physicality, but they're very different spaces. And and you want to go up, and eventually you want to get off this wheel altogether. And these outer links here are just like the conditions that also affect reincarnation, and that's things like how is your death, how is your birth, who are your friends, your associate. All these different things affect karma as well, and how and what realm you come back in. So Buddha taught that you never get off this wheel of samsara until you attain enlightenment. You're stuck here. You go around and around and around. And some high lamas can get through these bardos in 49 days, but a lot of us, we spend as much time in the lower astral realm as we do in a corporeal form or in a body. And that's wrong. We're getting tricked so badly here because the archons want you in that realm. You're easier to harvest in that realm than you are anywhere else. And look at the Yama. This is the guy who watches over all the realms. This guy's an archon. like this guy, it's the same as the seventh heaven in Gnosticism, where the archons are in every realm except for the seventh heaven. But they say this guy's under control of Manchushri Buddha, so he's not a bad archon. They've tamed him down, just like Padmasambhava was able to tame the mountain spirits. They tamed this guy down, and,
All
and
right. Hey, Sheldon, it's been like an hour and 40 minutes since we started this. How much longer do we have?
probably another 30 minutes.
Ooh, that's kind of long.
Yeah. Do you want to do another show, or do you want
I think
to just?
so. Let's do another show because the people are going to get. I have I believe in an hour and a half, the butt ache just start
Yep.
dictating. So I never make my movies more than an hour and a half. I just feel that way. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll do another half hour or 40 minutes or whatever you want. And it doesn't matter because people are going to get this and they're going to learn it and they're going to get the right teaching. So I
Yeah.
appreciate what you're doing and pretty in-depth look at what all these teachings are really saying. And I think you're taking us on a good trip here.
Okay, we'll finish this off on the in the final one.
Yep. Okay, guys, everybody, thanks for watching. I'm Jay Weidner. It's Reality Check, and I really appreciate all of you.